The ocean, a canvas of endless blue by day, transforms into a realm of profound mystery under the cloak of night. Yet, even within this nocturnal veil, there exists a specific, chilling window of time, between 2 and 4 in the morning, when the sea seems to claim its victims with an unnerving regularity, particularly around treacherous reefs. This isn't a maritime myth whispered by old salts. It's a pattern observed in accident reports, search and rescue logs, and the grim statistics of unexplained disappearances. The question isn't if boats vanish during these hours, but why this particular segment of the clock face holds such a disproportionate share of maritime tragedies. The answer lies not in supernatural forces, but in a complex, insidious convergence of human biology, environmental conditions, and the inherent vulnerabilities of navigation when the world is at its darkest and the human mind at its weakest. It is a story of the body's betrayal, the sea's subtle traps, and the thin line between vigilance and oblivion. At the heart of this deadly time slot is the human circadian rhythm, our internal biological clock that regulates sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, and core body temperature over approximately 24 hours. For most humans, the deepest point of physiological fatigue, the nadir of alertness and cognitive function, occurs precisely between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. This period, often referred to as the graveyard shift in industrial settings, is when reaction times are slowest, judgment is most impaired, and the urge to sleep is almost irresistible. Studies on watchkeepers in merchant vessels and naval personnel consistently show a significant drop in performance, increased errors, and higher rates of microsleeps during these hours, regardless of prior rest. For a single-handed sailor, or even a short-handed crew on a long passage, maintaining vigilance during this period is a monumental challenge. The brain, deprived of natural light cues and battling its own internal clock, struggles to process information effectively. Peripheral vision narrows, auditory processing becomes sluggish, and the ability to detect subtle changes in the environment, a faint light on the horizon, a slight alteration in the sound of the waves, a minor deviation on the chart plotter, is severely compromised. This isn't a matter of willpower, it's a fundamental biological imperative that even the most seasoned mariner cannot entirely overcome. Compounding this biological vulnerability are the unique environmental conditions prevalent during these early morning hours, especially near reefs. Absolute darkness. While night navigation is always challenging, the period between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. is often the darkest, particularly if the moon has set or is not visible. Without ambient light, visual cues are minimal. Navigation lights from other vessels can be misinterpreted, and the subtle signs of breaking waves over a reef, a change in water color, a line of white foam, become almost impossible to discern until it is too late. Even with radar, small, low-lying reefs can be difficult to detect, especially in choppy seas. Reduced visibility. Beyond darkness, factors like mist, fog, or heavy rain, which can develop or intensify in the cooler pre-dawn hours, further reduce visibility. A reef that might be visible at a distance during twilight can suddenly become an invisible menace. Tidal cycles. Many reefs are most dangerous at specific tidal states. Depending on the local geography, low tide during these hours can expose previously submerged hazards, or a strong incoming or outgoing tide can create powerful currents and confused seas around the reef, pushing a vessel towards danger or making evasive action difficult. The predictability of tidal cycles means that if a reef is particularly hazardous at, say, low tide, and low tide consistently falls between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., the risk factor skyrockets. Wind shifts. Localized wind patterns can also play a role. As land cools overnight, offshore breezes can develop, pushing vessels away from the coast. However, as the land begins to warm before dawn, these patterns can shift, sometimes unpredictably, creating unexpected cross-currents or squalls that can drive a vessel onto a reef, especially if the watchkeeper is not fully alert. Consider a typical scenario. A sailboat, perhaps on a long coastal passage, is approaching a known reef system. The watch schedule dictates that one crew member is on duty between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. This individual is likely battling profound fatigue. Their eyes are strained, their mind is foggy. They might be relying heavily on the autopilot and the chart plotter, perhaps occasionally glancing at the radar. The subtle alarm of a depth sounder or a faint change in the radar signature might be dismissed as a false positive or simply not registered by their fatigued brain. A slight course deviation, perhaps due to a momentary lapse in attention or an uncorrected current, goes unnoticed. By the time the sound of breaking waves or the jarring impact of the keel on coral registers, it is already too late. The vessel is aground, holed, or worse, being pounded to pieces by the relentless surf. Skidu, real-world incidents, though often lacking precise timestamps in public reports, frequently align with this pattern. Many groundings and collisions occur in the pre-dawn hours. The official investigations often cite human error, failure to maintain proper lookout, or navigational negligence. While these conclusions are technically correct, they often fail to delve into the underlying biological and environmental factors that predispose mariners to such errors during this specific, perilous window. It's not necessarily a lack of skill or intent, but a battle against the very physiology of the human body. See. The phenomenon is so pronounced that experienced maritime safety organizations and naval forces implement specific protocols for watchkeeping during these hours. These include increased manning. On larger vessels, additional personnel may be assigned to the bridge during the graveyard shift to ensure multiple sets of eyes and ears, and to allow for shorter, more frequent rotations. Enhanced monitoring. Automated systems for collision avoidance, like AIS and radar with guard zones, are set with stricter parameters, and alarms are often set louder or with more intrusive alerts. Stimulant use. In some professional contexts, controlled use of stimulants, like caffeine, is permitted to combat fatigue, though this is a temporary measure and not a substitute for proper rest. Briefing and handover. More thorough briefings are conducted during watch changes leading into and out of the graveyard shift, ensuring that the incoming watch is fully aware of all potential hazards and the vessel's precise situation. For recreational sailors, especially those on smaller vessels without the luxury of multiple crew members, these protocols are often difficult to implement. The solo sailor, in particular, faces an almost insurmountable challenge. Their watch is continuous, their rest fragmented. The temptation to let the autopilot handle everything and snatch a few moments of sleep is immense, and it is precisely during these vulnerable hours that such decisions can prove fatal. The Reef, a silent predator, waits patiently for the moment when human vigilance is at its lowest ebb. This isn't to say that all disappearances near reefs between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. are solely due to fatigue. Mechanical failures, sudden squalls, or unforeseen navigational hazards can occur at any time. However, the statistical clustering around this specific time window strongly suggests a causal link to the physiological state of the human body. The ocean, in its vastness, exploits our inherent weaknesses, and the reef, a fixed and unforgiving obstacle, becomes the instrument of its judgment. The mystery of the vanishing boats during these hours serves as a powerful, chilling reminder of the importance of respecting both the sea and our own biological limitations. It underscores the need for meticulous passage planning, robust redundancy in navigation systems, including non-electronic backups, and, crucially, an honest assessment of one's own fatigue levels. The sea does not forgive complacency, especially when the internal clock of the human body is screaming for rest. What are your strategies for combating fatigue during night watches, especially in challenging waters? Have you ever experienced a close call during the early morning hours? Share your experiences and advice in the comments below.